Can you hear me?
I can. Hello.
Hi,
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Good. Fine. Thank you. I'm just doing some last minute tech preparation. Um, you had a
Glasses on.
you had a nice week.
I did. We're expecting a hurricane tomorrow, which is pretty odd for California. But
Hmm.
so after this, I'm going to go get some water and batteries and candles and
Hmm. Yeah.
buckets.
Yes. Yeah. It's all a bit unpredictable, isn't it, at the moment around the world?
Mhm.
Hmm. Thankfully, in the UK, we've been, I think, probably one of the better places to be. Europe's pretty much on fire with Spain and Portugal and Greece, and so we've been quite lucky, really.
Yeah, Maui,
Yeah.
devastated.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Very frightening.
Yeah.
So have you done a lot of Zoom things before, or
What?
have you done many Zoom things before?
No, I haven't. I've done a lot of guest appearances at conventions and things like that.
Hmm.
So that's been a lot of fun. People come dressed up in
Oh,
Batman,
yeah.
Catwoman, and
Mm.
they've got scripts, they've got magazines, they've all kinds of paraphernalia. It's just amazing to me how many
Mm.
uh, Batman fans are still out there. I get fan letters all the time. It just blows me away.
Mm. Yes, one of the shows that just continues to find new generations, is gone forever, I think.
Yeah.
Um, have you ever been to a UK convention or just in the States?
No, I haven't. Get me in.
Mm. I'll spread the word, yes. I assume when fans meet you, it is mostly Batman, or is it Westworld, other things that they are interested
Batman and Westworld are the two main things.
in? Hmm. And I imagine you've had quite a resurgence with Westworld with the TV series, a lot more
Yeah,
interest, really.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now and that's what I want to talk about. I did a film. I hadn't wanted to act in over 40 years, and about 3 years ago I had this feeling that I wanted to do it, and 2 weeks later I'm starring in a film, and it's coming out uh well, August the 25th, I believe, is the premiere of it. it's
Ah,
at it's going to be at the Hollywood Film Festival.
oh, lovely.
It's the main thing, so I'm looking forward to that, and that's why I want to spread the word on that.
Oh, yes, we'll certainly give that some attention.
We can get people to the Hollywood Film Festival.
Hmm.
Uh, where is it going to be? World premiere at the Mann's Chinese Theater in Hollywood, which is a very famous theater, on the 28th, the 29th, and 30th. And then I'm doing slated to do another film for them. So
Oh, lovely.
yeah,
And that's not Night Mistress, that isn't it? The
that's Night Mistress. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then the new one that I'm doing is called Death Realm something. Where is it? Hold on. Oh, he posted it on my Facebook page. Actually, he made a comment on it. Hold on. She'll also be in the new film coming up, Death Realm: The Haunting Begins, starring Mark Hamill, Robert Picardo, Aaron Burr, Christopher Atkins, Racer, and Kevin Bacon.
Hmm. And is that all in the can now?
No, we haven't shot that yet.
No.
We're about to shoot that.
Is the strikes going to cause any issues with that, or is it?
Oh, well, I'm sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of, I think a lot of people don't necessarily think that it affects the British industry as much as it has, because of course, places like Pinewood Studios, it's Disney has the a long-term lease on it, so there's an awful lot of American productions that we
Yeah.
make over here, and the studios are essentially completely shut down.
Yeah.
So it's worldwide, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Hopefully the strike won't last too much longer.
So for those that have logged on, thank you for joining us. If you want to watch the episodes while we're talking, there's no necessary reason to, because it's a sort of a general conversation. But if you'd like to watch the episodes with us. Just want to pause on the opening shot of the episode, which is the Batman logo. I'll just give people a few moments to get that in front of them. Do not know of any technical issues anyone's having. We can always have a brief pause. Otherwise, we'll get going in about 30 second time.
Cool.
Okay. Just make sure no one else is any issues. I don't think so. Okay, I think we'll make a start. Okay, so thank you, Sean, for joining me to talk about your career and your appearances in Batman, and specifically, it's very much appreciated.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. So we're just going to do a countdown from 5, and then we'll all press play on the episode, and then we'll get started. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and play. So the first thing I wanted to ask you, Sean, was how did you get into acting in the first place?
Let's go back. So when I was 17, I won Miss Pennsylvania in the Miss World contest. Let me turn this lights. And I went on tour, and I met Ole Cassini along the way, and he asked me to model for him in New York. And Ole Cassini was a very famous dress designer at the time. So I modeled for Ole for I'd say 6-7 months, and I really didn't like it very much. And I met a girl. She goes, "You should come to Los Angeles and become an actress." And I went, "Okay." So I called my parents up and said, "Hey, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is I'm getting out of New York, and the bad news is I'm driving to California." And youth, I drove out to California almost straight, and I got here, and I had lunch with somebody, and they said, "What do you want to do?" I go, "Oh, I want to be an actress." She goes, "Oh, I have a friend who's an agent." And they made an appointment for me, and I went to see the agent, and he said, "You'd be really good for this part. I'm going to send you down to William Dozier." And William Dozier was the head of Paramount at 20th Century Fox Studios. And I walked in, and I had all Cassini. I mean, I remember wearing a purple mini skirt with purple patent leather boots, and walked in, and he looked at me. He said, "You're Catgirl." I went, "Okay." That's how I got the part. That's how easy it was, I thought. And 2 weeks later, I'm on the set of Batman.
Yeah, wonderful. Did you have any lasting memories of William Dozier at all?
I was so young, and it didn't mean anything to me to meet William Dozier. He was just another person that I was meeting. I mean, I was meeting so many celebrities from Ole Cassini. He kind of took me under his wing, and he and his brother, and we would go to a private club at the time in New York called Le Club, and I was hanging out with all these celebrities. So it didn't mean anything to me, and I was kind of one myself, because I was modeling for Ole, and I was Miss Pennsylvania. So meeting William Dozier, I wasn't nervous or anything. I had a lot of self-confidence for such a young age.
Well, I suppose having that success at an early age gave you that confidence, I suppose. Do you have any other highlights of your modeling days that you would like to mention?
Not really. I grew up in Philadelphia, and I wanted to be a model. And I went to June McAdams modeling school at 11 years old, and loved it at the time. And I entered beauty contests and won. And I guess the only person I really worked for was Ole Cassini, and he was a wonderful man. He taught me a lot. I learned a lot from Ole and his brother, but I learned a lot from Ole on fashion and design and matching. And so he gave me a really good sense of just, it stays with me to this day of fashion and what that means and how to, things matching and all that. So I'm very grateful to have, I've been very grateful and lucky along the way to have had some incredible mentors. We all need mentors. And Ole was one of them.
And when it came to the outfits that you wore in Batman, were you able to make suggestions, or was it kind of
Oh.
no?
Oh, no, that was their thing.
Because whether it's a bit different in the UK, where on TV shows I've spoken to people that have done lots of UK based stuff, and they sometimes can have wardrobe decisions or hair choices, but maybe America is sort of possibly maybe a bit different. Maybe I don't know.
The first day of shooting, and I was really green. I remember getting up at 3 a.m. to put all my makeup on, and only to go there and have it washed off. And the makeup artist was Ben Nye, who was a very famous makeup artist. I didn't know that at the time. And we washed my face and put it on, and Julie Newmar came in to look at me, and she goes, she can't wear her hair like that, it's too close to mine. So they had to do some hairstyling changes. And it was actually very frightening for me because I was in over my head. I knew nothing about acting at the time. And it was very painful.
And also you must have been aware of how big Batman was at that time, so that probably added to the nerves a little bit.
As I was on the set, I realized how big Batman. There were fans waiting outside the gate to hundreds of fans to meet somebody from Batman. And next door they were shooting Green Hornet, and that was with Bruce Lee. And the first day on set, I literally bumped into Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee and I became really good friends. And not many people know that Bruce was a cha-cha champion.
Oh.
And I love to cha-cha. And so we'd go to his studio and we put on music and we would dance.
Lovely.
And every chance I got to, when I was off the set, I'd go next door and watch Bruce perform. I was in awe of that man. He would map out everything in slow motion of what he was going to do, and then they'd say action, and he would do it fast. I mean, he did things with his body that were unbelievable. We'd be so, he was lonely because his wife Linda was, I think she was living he was coming down from San Francisco at the time, and I was all alone. So we became really good friends. He was a great man and one of my close friends at the time.
Oh, lovely. And you had that relationship, you kept in touch and all that sort of thing.
We did. We kept in touch until he moved back to China. And then we lost.
Lovely. Yeah, it's lovely to have that kind of unexpected relationship, isn't it? Your first scene is in Commissioner Gordon's office, of course, one of the iconic sets of Batman. And of course, you have Neil Hamilton as Commissioner Gordon, Stanford Webb as Chief O'Hara. Do you remember what it was like to work with them?
That's the first scene in the first scene that we shot actually was we were stealing Chad and Jeremy's voices. So that was the first scene that we shot, and I remember that scene very well. Yeah, that was I was so young, I didn't know anything. I didn't even know enough to pick up a script. And the first scene was Eeny, Meeny, Miny, and Mo and Catwoman. We were gonna have that scene of where we were stealing Chad and Jeremy's voices, and Julie Newmar said a line and there was dead silence, and the director said, "Your line, Miss Wynters." I go, "Line? What line?" And they said, "In the script." Script? What script? Literally. And there was a whole auditorium filled with people, and they started laughing at me, and I was devastated. And they said, okay, somebody get her a script and let's take a break. They gave me a script. I'm trying not to cry because I had my makeup on, and I literally ran out the door and bumped into Bruce Lee. And he said, what's the matter? And that's how our relationship, and I'm crying. He says, come with me. And Bruce started to help me with my lines and help me to do that. So yeah, that was the first scene. And it's interesting because it set up the whole tone for my life. Because the next day I sat in the office of Howie Horowitz, who was the producer. Bill Dozier was the executive producer, but Howie Horowitz was the producer. And he started, oh, you know, what are we going to do with you? And da 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 da. And I said, well, who's the best actor and acting teacher in town? And he said, well, Peyton Price, but he'd never take you. And I said, give me his number. And I made an appointment and I went to see Peyton. And he was, I'll never forget it. He was sitting in, he had turned his garage into an acting studio, and he was sitting there with Don Murray and Kent McCord. And Kent later on went to do Adam 12. And he looked at me and he had his glasses on and he looked me up and down and he said to me, well, do you know how to fuck in front of a camera? That was his opening line to me. And I said, well, if I did, I wouldn't be here. And he went, you're going to be in my class. And I studied with Peyton for 12 years. And that was an incredible experience because I never wanted to be put in that position of not, you know, I didn't know anything about acting. I didn't know how to hit a mark. I didn't know anything. But I learned, and I learned I made a commitment to him that I would study with him for 6 months and not go out on any auditions. And I gave him my word that I would do that. And about 2 years later, I was up for a role in Banachek, which was a TV show being shot with George Papard. And I read for the casting director and they sent me to the producer. The producer happened to be Howie Horowitz. And when I walked in, he went, oh no, not you. I go, Howie, let me just read for you. Let me just read for you. I said, I've been studying with Peyton now for 2 years. He says, you've been in Peyton's class? I went, yeah. He handed me the script. I read for him and he went, you got the part, baby. You're awesome. So that was like, I redeemed myself. And I got to shoot Banachek, which was a lot of fun with George Papard.
Yeah, yes, that sounds wonderful. So saying being so new to the acting world, how did you find your director James B. Clark? Was he kind of sympathetic to your sort of struggling a little bit with the with something that was so new to you?
I'm sorry, with who?
Oh, James B. Clark was the director of your Batman episodes. Did you?
That was
yeah.
Yeah, you know, I wasn't. They got real quick that I didn't know what I was doing. You know, but it set my character, no question about it, because I never ever want to be in a position where I wasn't. It was so raw. I was so new. I was so green, and nobody really helped me. You know, and I don't know if they could help me, but I learned. You know, I really got into, you know, Peyton took 10 people. I was one of the 10, and Kent McCord was in my class. David Canary, who went on to do Bonanza, and he was on, I think it was All My Children out of New York, where he played a double character. He played two brothers. So it was, you know, it was a great time. We'd finish class at 11 o'clock and we'd go down to a restaurant and sit there till 2, 3 in the morning discussing art and life. It was a a wonderful time in my life.
Mm.
From something so bad, so traumatic for me, and I met some interesting people. I met Steve Allen, who I was a fan of Steve Allen. He was, I don't know, he was in one of the scenes, and that was amazing for me. I mean, he was a brilliant man. He always carried a little notebook, and he wrote thousands of songs. He wrote This Could Be the Start of Something Big, which probably is his most famous. So I got to meet him. The other person that I became friendly with was Jay Sebring. And Jay, he was a very famous hair designer for men, and he actually was William Dozier's hairdresser. And the scenes where we were in the barbershop, that was supposedly a take of Jay Sebring. And I ran into him a year or 2 years later at a party, and he invited me. We hung out a little bit, and he said, "Hey, Friday night I'm going over Sharyn Tate's house. Why don't you join us? She'd love you." And I had something else to do. I said, "We'll make it another time." And poor Jay was one of the people that was murdered at the Sharyn Tate murders. And boy, that really took me back a bit.
Yeah. The thing that not only the tragedy that happened to those people, but that you were almost very easily potentially a part of it. It must be sort of like not getting on a plane that suddenly then crashes. I was going to mention that as we got to it, but yes, it was. I think it was a bit of an age of innocence. I think maybe was lost when that happened to Sharyn Tate and the whole Manson family issues. Do you think that actors became much more more wary, more sort of security? Do you think it kind of changed the industry a little bit in that respect?
I don't know. I don't know how other people felt, but I took it very personal because I knew Jay. Jay and I hung out. We had lunch together. 2 days before, we were hugging and talking and reminiscing, and and 2 days later, his life was taken. Something so horrific. And it affected me it still affects me when I think of Jay. To lose somebody in that horrific manner, but to be with him 2 days before, I was with him Wednesday night.
Yeah, I mean, it just highlights the fragility of life and what can happen, and sort of, how can it not affect you very, very profoundly?
And he was quite loved. He was Steve McQueen's hairdresser. William Dozier. He did a lot of celebrities' haircuts, men.
Oh yeah. I had a little look at his biography, and very impressive. Frank Sinatra, Paul Newman. He worked on Bullitt and Thomas Crown Affair, because of course Steve McQueen's hairdresser. So I think he was like the #1 hairdresser in America for quite some time. So yeah. He sounded like a lovely person.
First, usually it's women's hairdressers. He was a man's hairdresser. So yeah, and he got the part because he cut William Dozier's hair.
And I must say, I think he's really good in the episode. There's a lot of physical comedy with all his pieces of art he's trying to maintain, and then of course he leans on the vase and it breaks. So I think it's quite a nice little scene. I was wondering about your relationship with Judy Newmar, because as written, your characters do occasionally butt heads a little bit. Sort of, she says, I think at one point, "I'm top dog, don't you forget it." So
I was it's interesting because I had known Julie. I'd met her once before because we had the same actually hairdresser in New York. And but she wouldn't remember me. And then the first meeting was that incident where she said she can't wear her hair like that. It's too close to mine. And then she walked out. And we didn't really relate too much on the show. But I ran into her years later at a Marianne Williamson event, actually, when Marianne's running for president of the United States this time, but it was the last time she was running. And I walked up to her and I said, I don't know if you remember me, but I played Catgirl on Batman. She goes, well, of course I remember you, dear. Get in here and let's take some pictures together. And so we started taking pictures, and the photographer, she was like ordering him around. She goes, no, do it higher, step back, a little bit to the left, and you come over here. And I said, you know what, Julie? She went, what, dear? I said, nothing's changed. And she laughed and we laughed. And so it was, and I have a couple of pictures from that moment. So yeah, it was a nice moment of, bringing back that, that relation. Well, we never really had a relationship, but we had more of a better relationship in that, 15 minutes of than before. And we've actually, on Facebook, when something comes up on her, because we're Facebook friends, and she'll text me back and this and that. So yeah, she's for me, she was the best Catwoman there ever was.
Yes, I think most fans would agree with you on that point. Yes,
She was, and she was fantastic. I mean, Eartha Kitt was great, and Lee Merriweather. I actually met Lee Merriweather a few years ago when Burt Ward got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Yeah.
And so I was there, and Lee Merriweather was there, and Terry Moore, who Terry Moore and I are good friends. So but I got to meet her, so that was kind of nice.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, they don't really tend to come to UK conventions, and I think probably maybe because of age, it might be a bit too late now. But they always seem to be very good with their fans, are very sort of embraced, because not all actors necessarily, when they have such a well-known series or film, they sometimes become a bit uncomfortable with being perhaps a bit too much associated with one thing. But I think most people involved with Batman seem to really embrace it and enjoy it.
Well, Julie Newmar is, I mean, people love her. I mean, she was, I see pictures of Julie. She was quite something else.
Oh yeah,
she still is. She still is.
And I think she just recently turned 90, hasn't she? A few days ago, I believe. So still going strong.
She has this incredible garden that she at her home. So she's very into her garden. It's just beautiful, just beautiful.
Oh, wonderful. So we're just sort of getting to the cliffhanger on the first episode. I was wondering, would you sort of get much feedback in between the episodes from your family or friends or people that recognize you? Was there sort of an anticipation for the second episode that you remember at all?
You mean when I was doing it, or
when you were doing it? Yeah, was there kind of like a bit of hype?
Oh, yeah, I because I was Miss Pennsylvania, Philadelphia is a kind of small, even though it's a big city, it was a small thing. I was always in the paper, Miss Pennsylvania, Sharyn Wynters is on Batman. And, I remember the first time after I did Batman, because I would go home every 3 months to see my family. I got off the plane and there was a crowd, and I started like looking around like, who's there? And I realized, it's for me. It's for me. And so that was really interesting. And it was kind of a little bit hard for my family because people were hanging out in front of my house. And that was a bit concerning. So it got to be a bit hard to go home because they would find out when I was in town, but in other ways it was really nice because I would do interviews and TV shows and you know, so
Yeah.
in that, there's always the good and the, everything is you're weighing everything.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. We were saying that when it came to preparing for this role, it was very much sort of you were learning on your feet. But having then gone to acting classes, would you then sort of do character development when you had a script or you had a role? Would you kind of make a backstory for yourself? How was your process as an actress?
Oh, it depends on the role, it depends on the character. I love doing in-depth and having a fully realized human being out of any role that I would play. So I would, whatever it was, I would really get into the depth. So because film is a visual form, much more than stage.
Yeah.
And so the more life that you can bring to that performance, the better off you are.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It served me well.
Yeah.
And studying, I'm just so grateful that I had somebody like Peyton Price, who was, again, I'm blessed to have had such a great mentor.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Family, because he only took 10 people, but he had classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they had classes on Mondays and Wednesdays, and so we all knew each other and we were family. And acting classes today are 40, 50, 60 people. So there was an intimacy that we had just sitting around and, as he would call it, talking and listening in your own person. And, I learned great skills from him, especially about listening.
Yes.
Although don't ask my children that, because I think as they're growing up, they would say, you don't listen. I remember I go, well, I don't listen. Well, I was trained at listening. What do you mean? So
I say is I think the character you have with how you bounce off Judy Newmar in the episode, I think is really good, because there is that frostiness that may have been there because maybe you were a new face, maybe you were a bit nervous, but it also played very well to how it was written as well. So I think it was, you think it enhanced your performance because you were a bit nervous and
if I could only go back and redo it, I would be so grateful. To learn, to have the skills that I have now, or then after, and be able to redo it would be like night and day. But I didn't know anything. I had no technique. And Batman is so out there that you really had to have a technique to be able to do it. And I didn't have any skills at that time. No skills. I did in about 6 months, and just to be able to have done a film, a TV show for Howie Horowitz, so for Banachek, redeemed myself. So that really, and I worked a lot at Universal. I did some great shows there. I did Kojak, Banachek, Rockford Files, Police Story. So I worked a lot at Universal, so that was a nice thing.
Oh,
Batman was shot at Desilu Culver.
Yeah. And how did that compare to other studios that you'd worked
with?
Desilu
Culver was a very small studio. It was an offshoot of 20th Century Fox, and it was a really nice studio. It's funny because I was invited to a premiere about 6 months ago. Robert Davi produced and directed a film, and they sent me the address. And so I went down there and I go, this looks familiar. And I'm walking in and I went, oh, this is the old Desilu Culver. I went, oh, I mean, and it's all totally changed. I mean, it's incredible. I go, this is my start. This is where I shot Batman. So yeah, I hadn't been on that lot in a billion years. And it's now Sony, I think it's Sony Pictures or something now.
Oh, right. I was wondering about the action sequences in Batman. There's always a couple of famous fights, one per episode. I take it most of the action was kind of shot where you weren't around, but there are some shots where you and Julia Newmar are there. So what
Like
was it?
sitting by the doorway.
By a doorway, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
That was the scene with Meanie, Miny, and Mo
mhm.
fighting,
Yeah, yeah.
throwing things.
Mhm.
Yeah, we were uh yeah. I was watching that. I mean, I'd never seen action. I never saw how anything was done. So I was really, obviously I was very green. I didn't know how they did any of that. So I was fascinated by how they mapped things out. This is what's going to happen, and then everything is so planned. And I never realized that, because when you see the final cut, it's real fast, but everything is mapped out.
Hmm.
We're going to throw this, it's going to go over here, the stunt man's going to come here, we're going to do this and that. And that was fascinating to me.
Hmm.
I've always liked to know the background of how things are done. So, and yeah, that was a kind of a fun scene for me.
Hmm.
I think that's the first scene where I actually met Batman and Robin, or Burt Ward and Adam West.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That was the first scene that we were all together.
And how would you find Adam West and Burt Ward?
Yeah, they were both very nice, kind of stay in character, so you don't want to get too friendly. We're in opposing teams, and I'm like supposedly Julie Newmar to Batman was Catgirl Eni to Burt Ward, so they kind of were like insinuating that type of a thing.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, because in some stories, the a Catwoman sidekick would sort of try and seduce Robin, and there'd be a bit more of sort of a kind of sort of element of that, not so much in your story. Did you meet Chad and Jeremy?
I did. I
Hmm.
did. I was a big fan.
So you
So
you knew of them, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Well, of course I knew of them. They were extremely popular back then.
Hmm.
So uh yeah, I did get to meet them. I could talk to them a little bit. They were ooh, sorry, that's my dogs.
Oh.
They were huge.
Hmm.
Beatles and Chad and Jeremy. It was when the whole English movement came over from that were taking over America.
Hmm.
And so I was thrilled to meat them.
But yes, to get on a show like Batman, you had to be internationally, work on both sides of the pond. So
There were such incredible actors
hmm.
that did cameos, and
Hmm.
and I actually got friendly with Burgess Meredith.
All right.
Yeah, and I had met him. My car was parked next to Burgess's, and
Hmm.
also I can't remember the other person, but I would see Burgess through the years, and he was a lovely, lovely, lovely man.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was one of those people that always seemed to love Batman. They always had a script ready for him just in case he was in town, and they would, go at very short notice for him. So you loved the show, and I think the same with Julie Newmar as well. To come back to Chad and Jeremy, Jeremy's still with us, and I have done something with him, not for Batman, but for something else, and he did
Are,
went on to do quite a lot of acting.
aren't they both still with us?
Chad unfortunately died December 2020, sadly. I think he was
For that.
79. So that was, and I think they kind of did work with each other on and off, I think pretty much until the end. And Jeremy went on to do a lot of acting, and in addition to his music career, and he's still with us, I'm happy to say. Um, So I just wanted to know, would you have watched the episode when it went out? Would it have been something that would have been of interest to you to see the episode on broadcast?
I think I watched it at the time, but it was so traumatic for me that I don't want to see it. I don't, because I don't even know who that person is. Because when I see it, I'm reminded of how scared I was and how raw it was for me. And,
Yeah.
fortunately or unfortunately, that's what I'm noted for, Batman, because it's, I mean, I get fan letters all the time, and the response of when I do these conventions it's overwhelming to me that there's so many incredible Batman fans out there. And I think I shared with you that they come with Batmobiles to sign and scripts to sign and come in costume. And I did the last year I did the Mid-Atlantic convention. There were three other people that were on Batman that we all stayed in the same little Linda Gay Scott was one of them, and I can't remember the other two ladies, but yeah, it was a lot. That was a lot of fun. Very surprisingly, a lot of fun. I mean, but there was a line. I mean, there were thousands, and we had a group picture, and they would stand in line and get autograph from one and go to the next and go to the next and go to the next to get all the pictures from the people that were in Batman.
Yeah, it's the whole relationship with celebrity and fans, I think, is far more open than it would have been back in the 60s and 70s. And I think it's a very nice relationship that people are much more accessible, and it's perhaps the loss of mystique, perhaps arguably. So we know a bit more of how things are made, so maybe a bit of the magic is kind of rubbed away. But I think ultimately it's a better situation, really. There's one person in the fight scene that you have with in the dance hall, Joe Flynn. I don't know if you recall him.
Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was a nice man. He's very kind. Yeah. Forgot about Joe. Yeah.
Yeah. Another very nice, a nice small role, but very memorable.
Yeah. And I think I went on to we did something else together, but I can't remember which show we were together. I want to say Love American Style, but I'm not sure. I have to look at that. But yeah.
So I think what struck me is he had quite an interesting start. He was originally a ventriloquist, and then he started off in radio. So I think he had quite a sort of varied, interesting career. I was wondering, were your parents always supportive of your career?
Hold on.
Oh, also, yeah, no problem.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, my dogs are. I have a puppy.
Oh.
I have a little Frenchie, so.
Oh, very nice.
She's into everything. Were my parents supportive? My father was much more supportive than my mother. I left home. I mean, when I won Miss Pennsylvania, I graduated high school, and 2 months later, I entered the contest and won. And I went on tour, and she wasn't real happy with that. And then it was really almost impossible living at home because people would be hanging out in front of my house trying to see me, dropping all kinds of things off at the front door, flowers. It was constantly. And my father was very well known in politics. He was the deputy insurance commissioner of the state of Pennsylvania. He was also a delegate to the Democratic National Convention. And we drove out to California in 1960. And we had lunch with Kennedy.
Oh.
They were kind of actually became friends. Kennedy would call my house sometimes. And so, my father was pretty well known in politics. And it was, you know, it was hard. You know, I could not go back. Once I won Miss Pennsylvania, I couldn't go back home. So when 3 months after winning Miss Pennsylvania, when I met Ole Cassini, I was we were judging the Miss Hemisphere contest, and he was opening up a new bathing suit line in New York. And he asked me, would I model for him exclusively for bathing suits at the Waldorf? And I said, yep. And so he called my parent. We talked to my parents. He said he would take care of me. He found me a place to live. He found me a roommate. He was a very kind man, Ole. And I learned so much about fashion from him.
Right.
I soaked it up like a sponge. And he was a very classy man. And but they weren't, you know, my mom, you know, always reminded me, I called her every Wednesday and Sunday, that I left home. So there was, yeah, I think on one hand they were proud, you know, because there was a lot of publicity on me all the time in Philadelphia. But the other hand, and now I know what it feels like because both my sons have moved away. So it's hard when a child moves away from home.
Yeah, sort of letting them go, but you don't it's difficult, isn't it, to do that.
Right.
Did you
The difference is I don't make my children feel guilty.
well yeah, yes, that's right.
My mother made me feel guilty. She always reminded me that I left home.
Yeah, not
And that my brother didn't. So grateful that my brother was there to take care of her.
Yeah.
And I was young, you know, I was 17 when I left.
I suppose it made you very independent, and it drove you to probably achieve maybe more than perhaps you would have done under other circumstances. Do you have any lasting memories of John F. Kennedy when he was around? Did you kind of an impression of him?
You know, so my father loved politics. He absolutely loved it. And when he was a delegate, all the delegates would send their books and just memorabilia because they wanted his vote. So my father said, look, we're driving out to California. I want you to look through this. I want you to pick a candidate so we can have a discussion. So I looked through all that and I picked Adlai Stevenson. And he picked, you know, he was going to nominate Kennedy. And so when we got to California and I got to the convention floor, I had like a little baseball cap and I had so I got all these Adlai Stevenson buttons. And there were about, I don't know, 8 to 10 delegates that were invited to a private luncheon with Kennedy and their family. And we're going out the door and I had all these Adlai Stevenson buttons on, and my mother, and this is the difference between my mother and my father. My mother said, you can't go to a Kennedy luncheon wearing Stevenson buttons. And my father interrupted and said, I raised her to be a free thinker. If she wants to go to a Kennedy luncheon with Stevenson buttons, let her do so. So we go to this luncheon, and my father had a lot of charisma. In 2 minutes, he's up there with Kennedy, talking to Kennedy. He's got his arm around him and he brings him over to meet his family. And Kennedy looks at me, takes my hand and he says, I see you're wearing Stevenson buttons. He's a good man. And I went, yeah. He says, but I'm better. And I melted, absolutely melted. He had such incredible charm. And, you know, he would occasionally, they became, I don't want to say good friends, but they were friendly. I mean, occasionally the White House would call. I'd be like, Dad, you know, White House is on the phone. And, you know, the day that November 22nd, that Kennedy got assassinated, I was in school and they sent us home. And I remember that day I came home and my father was sitting on his chair crying like a baby. And I never saw my father cry before. And that was pretty traumatic. And then years later, I was on a film called Hook, Line, and Sinker with Jerry Lewis and Peter Lawford. And I had told Peter the story. So Peter and I became friendly. And he comes to me one day and he says, "Hey, Peter Salinger is giving a congratulations private party for Robert Kennedy. Why don't you come with me and you know, help me set it up, and you know, you'll be able to meet Robert Kennedy." And so I went, sure. So the limousine picks me up, and it was at the Factory. There was a private club called the Factory. And we're in the back, and I'll never forget it. Peter had a glass in his hand, and we're watching Robert Kennedy on television at the Ambassador. And Peter says, "Will you hurry up so you can come to your party?" And just then Robert got assassinated. And Peter took his glass and he threw it against the wall. And he shouted, "He was warned. He was warned." And Peter left and he said, "You stay here and tell everybody." There was no cell phones at the time. So all these people were coming to this party, not knowing that Robert Kennedy was assassinated. The next day the set was closed. And when we went back on Monday, we never talked about it. Peter, yeah. And it's interesting because I'm kind of friends with his son, Robert Jr., Bobby Kennedy, and he's running for president of the United States. And I had a fundraiser a couple of years ago because he produced a film. And I brought him into my office and I showed him my letter from JFK for my Sweet 16, wishing me, sorry he couldn't be at my, because my father invited him to my Sweet 16. And I showed him, here's a letter from the White House from JFK, saying, wishing me a happy Sweet 16. I'm sorry he couldn't be there to help me celebrate. So I showed him some of my father's memorabilia, you know, his little card to the Democratic National Convention. And so he's a good man. He's a good man. I hope he wins.
But yes, I certainly hope so. I mean, it's obviously very difficult political climate, isn't it, in America at the moment? So it's difficult to know. I mean, we have lots of issues over here as well. So of course, you know, it's never.
Well, the media is not telling the truth about a lot of things.
Yes, it's which media and what their angle is and all kinds of.
And who that man is and what he wants to do, and with everything, they haven't told the truth about anything.
Yeah.
And that's a shame. So people need to discern and find out their own information and find out what's really the truth, and not believe anything the media says, because basically the media is bought by Big Pharma.
Well, yeah, I mean, same over here. You know, got to kind of very much sort of cast your own path, and I wonder why shows like Batman and superheroes are particularly appealing to people is because it's a much more black and white situation. You know, there's less shades of grey than in the real world, and it's much purer. So that's why I think we like those kind of heroes, I think.
Yeah. And there was a lot more innocence. I remember when I went to see the Batman film, the first one, I was shocked. It was so dark. And we've become dark. The world has become dark. But hopefully in that darkness comes light, and people will see the light and see the truth. And that's what I pray for every day, you know.
Yeah, I think that's the power of drama, isn't it? And how important film and TV is, because you can sort of introduce topics and you can sort of like Star Trek, it was morality plays basically set in space. So you kind of sort of, if you show things that haven't happened before in drama, people may think, oh, actually, there's a different viewpoint to this, and maybe if I'm from a minority background, or maybe I can achieve this or that. So are you struck sometimes by the power that, say, your profession has on people?
Well, it holds a lot of weight, or it did, but people are a lot of people are getting fed up with what's going on.
Hmm.
So they're
Yeah.
waking up. They're waking up here in America.
Oh, good, good. Yeah, it's always difficult to know how much we, being in the UK, kind of how
How
much
much
news.
you mirror?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how sort of UK news is sort of shown in America, whether you get a lot of international news or whether it's because we seem to get a lot of international coverage on world events. I don't know if America's a bit different in that respect.
Yeah.
Hmm. Is it more sort of American centric, sort of in terms of some of what the media kind of sort of talks about?
I don't know, I try not to listen to any media
Hmm.
because I don't believe anything they tell me. So I have
Yeah.
my own sources
Hmm.
of information. This whole pandemic fiasco of putting people in fear and making them be in their houses and forced vaccinate, all of that is just people are starting to see what really what happened. And so
Yeah.
they're not trusting the media anymore.
Yeah, and I think this was so much mistrust here as well, because we say that the pandemic being an example that so many people weren't trusting what the government was saying about getting vaccinated, whereas 30 years ago everybody would have stood in line and not questioned it in the same way.
That's the good news.
Hmm.
That's the good news, that people are waking up
Hmm.
and starting to think for themselves. And maybe that's the light from the darkness of this whole pandemic. There's a great movie by Mickey Willis called Plandemic, The Great Awakening.
Mhm.
Everybody needs to watch that.
Oh, good. I'll look it up.
And it's free.
Oh, is it on
Yeah,
YouTube
just
or
Google. Yeah, just
Google it?
Google Plandemic, The Great Awakening. Plan, like PLAN.
I will do so. That sounds very good.
By Mickey Willis.
Hmm. So we were saying about the power of drama for a moment. When you're at these conventions, do you sometimes get struck by stories maybe fans have about how important Batman is, or maybe your episodes? Do you have those kind of sort of things happen to you from time to time?
I get so appreciative and that people still care
Hmm.
enough to dress up and and meet me. I'm very grateful.
Hmm.
I've had an incredible career, and I've met some incredible people. I've got to work with some incredible people, and I feel very blessed.
Hmm.
I feel
Oh, good.
very
Yeah. There was one. There's always a famous window guest when Batman are going down the building, about the building. There's always somebody that tends to pop out and say hello. In this episode, it was a gentleman called Don Ho, a very famous
Ron Ho,
Hawaiian.
I forgot about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Would you have
He
met
was
him?
famous at he was famous at the time.
Yeah. Would you
No,
have encountered?
I did not get to meet him.
Yeah, yeah. I got a sense of people like that were kind of in and out, and sort of very quickly. Um, So I just wanted to move away from Batman for a little bit, and I believe.
I thought we were doing that, talking about Kennedy.
Oh yes, yes, yeah. I will sort of weave in and out of things. Oh, before I forget to ask you though, of course, your fellow villains. Did you have your memories of the actors playing the other? Because of course you were the Catwoman and the kittens. The
Meanie, Miny, and Mo.
Mo, yes. Did they kind of have any sort of lasting impressions on you?
Uh, Not really.
No.
I mean,
No.
yeah, yeah. I would occasionally run into one of them, and I can't remember, Castellanco or something. I can't remember. Do you know who
It
played?
was TJ Costo. I've
Yeah,
got it written
I
down
think
here.
he was the one I talked to the most.
Ah, right, yeah. Um, yeah, in all their cases, this was their only Batman appearance, where some people kind of just sort of kept turning up in episodes. You mentioned some of your other credits earlier on. I did want to mention Police Story, the TV movie, because that had people like DeForest Kelly, of course, known as Dr. McCoy from Star Trek. Was Police Story a good thing to be on?
Yeah, I like that. That was a fun shot. Yeah, and actually that was shot at Paramount Studios, and that was my favorite studio.
Ah.
It was more of a family. Howard Koch, my first film that I did was The Odd Couple with Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau, and that was a great experience. Walter was a riot. I mean, absolute riot. And then years later, they were shooting The Odd Couple TV show, and who played? I can't remember the actor, but he was from Philadelphia, so we kind of connected. You know, anybody that was from Philly, when you meet another actor that's from Philly, you know, there's kind of a connection there.
I was just looking up who was in that. Is it Tony Randall you're thinking of, or Jack Klugman?
Jack Klugman, yeah. Yeah. So Jack and I, there was this great Mexican restaurant across the street from Paramount Studios. I want to say Lucy's. I think it was Lucy's that everybody used to go to. It was like thing, and we used to go there and have lunch and talk. And yeah, Jack Klugman, he was a funny, great guy.
Okay, lovely. So what was Jack? Do you remember encountering Jack Lemmon?
Jack stayed to himself. Walter Matthau was out and about and talking and all that. Jack kind of was, did his scenes and kind of was very polite and walked back into his dressing room. But Walter kind of hung out and, kibitzed. And so, yeah, we got to talk a bit. So that was a really pleasant experience. I liked that studio. That was more of a family. I shot, let's see, Love American Style there. I shot Police Story there. I can't remember what else. Hook, Line, and Sinker. I was at Columbia, which was right down the street.
And another project I want to mention, The Female Bunch. Was that interesting?
Yeah, that was a very interesting thing. I wouldn't even know where to start on that one. So that was an Al Adamson film. And Al Adamson would do these, I forget what they're called.
So exploitation sort of films, I think, was that the word for it?
They were called something else, and a very famous director had liked those type of films. I can't remember. But so here's an interesting piece of information. Al Adamson, he made like horror kind of films. So the Female Bunch, it was called when we were shooting it, it was called The Time to Run with Russ Tamblyn from West Side Story. Russ and I became really good friends. The script was atrocious. Russ and I were out there trying to asking us to rewrite it, and I knew nothing about writing, so just goes to show you. But it was Lon Chaney Jr.'s last film. He was dying of cancer, and Al Adamson had a bizarre death himself. He was murdered at his house, and the murderer buried him in his jacuzzi and put cement over it. So they've done a whole documentary, which they interviewed me last year on Al Adamson. We shot that in, I want to say Fruita, Utah, Bicknell, Utah. It was the first time I was ever on location. And yeah, but working with Russ Tamblyn, so our motel rooms were next to each other. When I walked into Russ's room, he had pictures, and it looked like home. He says, when I travel, I always take things with me so I feel at home. So he taught me that, like when I would go on location or when I travel, I would take things to make me feel at home. So Yeah, Russ was a great guy. It was fun working with Russ.
Okay, lovely. And I think it was Jennifer Bishop, I think, was one of the leads in that one. Did you have much to do with Jennifer Bishop?
We didn't get along too well, actually. Actually, she was going with a guy for 10, 11 years. And the ironic story on that one was I was at a private club before the film was released, and a gentleman came up to me and said, you're in, it was called A Time to Run. I said, how do you know that? He says, because I sang the lead song to that. And he says, I was going with Jennifer Bishop. And I later married this guy. So he kept showing up every time I would be someplace. He kind of coincidentally was there, and we later married. We were married for about 5.5 years. So that was an interesting little tidbit.
Yeah. You did do an episode of Kojak, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. So that was my favorite shoot with Kojak, Telly Savalas. So I was dating Omar Sharif for about 9 months.
Right.
And I met Omar when he had just finished shooting McKenna's Gold with Gregory Peck and Eli Wallach and Telly Savalas, and I forget who else was on it. And he was finishing that up into Funny Girl or Funny Lady, whichever one came first. And so I would hang out with Telly and Omar, because Omar was in awe of Telly, because he said, watch this, Sharyn. We'd be on the set of McKenna's Gold, and Telly would have a phone. Hold on, baby. And he had another phone. Women love Telly Savalas. And a few years later, here I am on Kojak, and the first scene is they're pulling me out of the river because I was murdered. And it was so cold, back lot of Universal, 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm wearing these clothes, and they're pouring water on me, and I'm laying there, and then they bring Telly in, and he sees me, and he went, Sharyn? I went, yeah, I'm your dead person that you have to investigate. He said, he's called everybody over. He says, get her some blankets. And he just gave me very special treatment. And I loved Telly. Telly and I were good friends. He was a great guy. It was the most fun set. It was my favorite all time of anything I've ever shot was Kojak with Telly Savalas.
Yeah, he always seems like a lovely character, and I've heard stories where he's been entertaining.
Charming. He was so charming, and somehow he reminded me of my father. They both were kind of bald, and he just reminded me of my dad. Yeah, he was great.
Well, good. Did you meet DeForest Kelley on Police Story?
Yes.
You did. Well, any impressions of him?
Remember?
Just sort of an out sort of thing. I must mention Westworld with Yul Brynner. How was that as an experience?
That was a really good experience. I'd go out to lunch with Richard and James. There was a great little restaurant across the street from, I forget what studio that was at. I know Warner Brothers. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I got to hang out a little bit with Yul Brynner. He actually, I knew I had a distant cousin, actually, Harvey T. Weinstein, who was a producer, and he actually was producing the last film that Marilyn Monroe was on, and actually he was the one that fired her from that show. And Harvey T. Weinstein, I have no relation to the Weinsteins though. So he was my cousin, and I never met him. I did meet him once though, but he was friends with Yul Brynner. And so when I told Yul that, my cousin was Harvey, when you know somebody who knows somebody, it sets up a connection. And I'll never forget it. Yul had a bit of an ego, so I was sitting we were sitting on the ranch, and I was sitting on the bar there, and he had his lasso, and he says, look how well I can do this. And he's lassoing, and he throws it, and he hits me, and I fall backwards, and I fall off the slot, and so that was kind of an interesting moment. But it was a great, that was a great shoot. It was Michael Crichton's first film that he directed. He you know, he went on to do major things after that. He was in medical school, and when he wrote the Andromeda Strain, but Westworld was the first film that he actually directed. It was an incredible concept, and I got to work with James. My scenes were with James and Richard.
Right.
So I played an Indian mechanical person to try to be human. I didn't think those were the last days that an actor could play something other, you know. And now, if you know, there's this whole thing with Bradley Cooper right now playing a character because he's playing a Jewish guy, and he's got a nose on, and they're making this big thing. It's like, we're actors, you know, we're actors. You know, I used to be able to play an Indian or something. We can't do that anymore. And it's ridiculous, because that's what acting is about. Acting is about playing something other than yourself. And they're giving Bradley Cooper all this, you know, problems because he's playing, I think it's Leonard Bernstein or somebody like that, who he's playing a Jewish person. And that's fine. That's what we're supposed to do. But they've limited us so much. Playing, you know, I can't play an Indian. I can't play this person. I can't play that person. Or I can't, you know, I played a East Indian in the Doris Day show when I, you know, worked with Doris Day, and I couldn't do that today. You know, they limit you.
Yeah, I think the whole Bradley Cooper issue. I mean, yes, they probably could have found an unknown actor that was Jewish to play the role, but surely more people will go and see the film because Bradley Cooper's in it, and people who will highlight the story, and therefore, of course, should be the primary concern, really. It does seem, because I did see Bradley Cooper he came to the West End and he played John Merrick, so the very famous Elephant Man story, and he had no prosthetics or anything, and he starts off the play naked from the waist up, and his doctor describes the condition he has, and as it goes through all the elements, Bradley changes his body position and all sorts of things, and within 5 minutes you believe he is John Merrick. So you're right, actors should be able to play anything, because that's the whole point of the craft.
That's the point of the craft.
And
they're making this, I mean, how many people have played all these different roles that had prosthetics?
Yeah.
And now they're making this big thing that he's playing a Jew. Well, okay. Bradley's also from Philadelphia, by the way.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting in UK theatre is we're starting to get a lot of sort of gender fluid and age fluid productions. Ian McKellen did Hamlet recently and played Hamlet, of course, who's supposed to be like a 20-year-old student, and Ian was 80 at the time. He got a lot of journalists were saying, well, aren't you a bit old to play this character? And he said, well, I was 9,000 years too young to play Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, and nobody questioned that. So why would you question this? You know, and it worked as well. You know, it was a really good point.
Have we limited us actors to, you can only play, you know, a certain role because you can't play, you know? It's ridiculous. It's just so sad. It's just so sad what's happening all over the world, but you know, in the industry.
Yeah, whether it will all eventually sort of snap back into common sense, I don't know, but it's an interesting time, I think. We mentioned obviously Michael Crichton. Of course, most people probably know his work for Jurassic Park, the Jurassic Park novels, and then of course the films. Would you say that Michael was a good director?
Yes, he was great.
Yeah,
he was very caring and very. Yeah, I love working with Michael. He was you know, he was nervous. He said he was nervous.
Mhm.
Because it was his first film, but he was wonderful. It was a great experience.
Okay.
Most of the things that I worked on, I had some, you know, were great experiences.
Oh, well, wonderful. So you have this very successful acting career that's building a building, and then sadly you had to step away from acting. I think it was health reasons. Do you want to perhaps talk a little bit about sort of, because then you went into different therapies and different look in terms of
So,
approaches to medicine?
well, I stepped away for a few reasons. When I was 25, I was diagnosed with cancer. And back in those days, I didn't know anybody, and I decided I'd rather die than be cut up. And it led me to this alternative world. And long story short, I went to see Dr. William Donald Kelly out of Grapevine, Texas, and through his protocols, he cured me of cancer. It was a lot of nutritional and cleaning up my act and, you know, getting rid of toxins. And after I was cured, I went, this is what I want to do. I need to get this information out because, you know, when you find something that you like or that works, you're obligated to share it. And so I got the great honor to study under Dr. Kelly, and I learned all of, you know, a lot from him. And then through the years, I got my degree as a naturopath, and I've studied hundreds of different modalities. You know, I've been doing Chinese medicine and all different types of things. But I gave up acting when I was still acting, basically. But I gave up acting when I was pregnant with my son. I had lost a child before, and I didn't want anybody else to raise them. And so I gave up acting for 43 years and never looked back. I never had a desire to go back. And a very odd thing happened about 3 years ago. I was getting dressed to go to an event, and I had the TV on, and it's like God came down, and I pointed to the TV and I go, I want to get back into acting. I spoke it. I spoke the words. I couldn't believe it, because through the years, people would ask me, do you want to get back into acting? And I had no desire, just the thought of getting an agent, getting a manager, getting pictures, going through auditions, just no desire. And I go to this event and I sit next to a woman, and she's asking me questions. What do you do? And I go, well, I'm a naturopath and I work with nutrition. And I started telling her she could care less. And she goes, were you ever an actor? And I go, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I was. She goes, what did you do? So I told her, and she looked at me and she said, have you ever thought about getting into acting, back into acting? I said, yeah, about 20 minutes ago. And she goes, well, my name is so-and-so, and I'm an agent, and I'd love for you to come down. Long story short, I went down, I signed up. I called a friend of mine. I said, hey, I'm getting back into acting, but I haven't picked up a script in 40 years. I don't even know if I can remember a line. She goes, you know, I do a workshop on Thursdays where I invite directors and producers. Why don't you come in on Tuesday? It'll take me a few months to get you up there, but I'll get you into the workshop. I go in on a Tuesday. She gives me a scene, and she's like dumbfounded. She said, I've been doing this scene for 30 years. You're the best I've ever seen do it. You're going to put it up this Thursday. I go in on a Thursday. I put it up. There was a producer there, and I finish, and he comes up, and I walk into my seat. He says, come with me outside. Go outside. He says, you're starring in my film. 2 weeks later, so it seems to be 2 weeks is a good thing for me. 2 weeks later, I'm starring in a film called Mistress, and I play a badass villain, and it's finally being premiered next month at let's see, the Grauman's Chinese Theater at the Hollywood Film Festival. It's a 3-night event. I think it's the 20, I can get you the dates, the 25th, the 26th, and the 27th, I want to say. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm excited about it finally coming out. Ray Michaels is the producer, and I'm slated to do another one of his films called Death Realm or something. I guess at my age, I play horror women. So and maybe in another sense, I played horror women at a younger age, just a different type of horror, manipulative females that, you know,
Mm.
That's just my typifying statement of look, because I'm dark, and so I can play those dark roles. But I'm excited that this film is finally coming out, and apparently it's the key film of the whole Hollywood Film Festival.
Hmm.
So it's nice to, after 40 years of not being in the industry, to come back, and they've given me first billing, starring role. Yeah, it's the 28th, the 29th, and the 30th of September. It's the Hollywood International Film Festival. So if anyone wants to go, they can email me, and I will, I'm not sure, but I can probably get them on a list or something. I don't know.
Oh, good. That's yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would love
Come on
to
out.
see it.
Come
Yeah,
on out, Philip.
yeah. Well, if I had the money, I would be there. But it's
But mm, my my day gig, so to speak, is I'm still a naturopath,
mm,
and that's my love, is to help people get healthy and
mm,
get rid. I've written a 500-page book called The Pure Cure: A Complete Guide to Freeing Your Life from Dangerous Toxins. We're living in a toxic world,
mm,
and I have a whole protocol that in 90 days to get rid of glyphosate, parasites, heavy metals, and plastics in our bodies while you're nourishing your body. So I've been doing that for quite a while,
mm.
and it works, and I love to help people feel better.
Oh, yes, very noble thing that gives that desire to share your knowledge and to better, lives of people is fantastic. And I think you have been recognised with a couple of awards. I think for your work. I think you got a lifetime achievement award about sort of 10 years ago, and there must
Done
be
your homework.
well, I try, so it must be quite gratifying to get that acknowledgement from communities.
And I got that Lifetime Achievement Award in Philadelphia. That was kind of special.
Oh yeah, yeah, enough like your hometown sort of recognise you. Yeah, yeah. Coming back to acting, do you find that it's a very different sort of system, or the acting environment different to when you first started out? Is there any kind of noticeable changes?
Fully. Now, that person, when I was acting, and I had they'd send you the script, and you'd go down and you'd either meet the casting director. Sometimes I would go right up to the director, the producer, and you have a relationship. Those relationships don't exist anymore.
Mm,
It's if you're up for a role, you have to do a selfie and send it in,
mm,
and there's no more person to person. We've lost that personal touch. Now,
yeah.
I don't like that very well, I mean, I got that part in Night Mistress because he saw my work in alive, you know. Uh, so, and we have a relationship. I'm also doing another film, which I'm really excited about. If the strike is ever out, called I'll get Vice Squad New Orleans.
Oh
So
yes, there's a couple of Vice Squads, isn't there? And you're
yeah,
producing them, I think.
yeah. So it's a whole series.
Mhm.
Vice Squad New Orleans, Vice Squad Miami, Vice Squad I think LA, and I think there was going to be one Vice Squad Hawaii. Um, and so I have a starring role in that. It's going to be a a movie, and then they're going to make it into a television.
Mm.
So I'm very grateful, to have been away so long and come back and be able to work and have fun. I had so much fun on Night Mistress.
Mm.
The first time back, it was a big difference from the first time I'm doing Batman,
Mm.
because even though I was away from it for so long, the the groundwork had been laid from Peyton, of being able to talk, as he would call it, talk and listen in your own person.
Mm.
And I just fell right into it. So it was a great experience.
Mm.
It was a great experience. I'm very, very blessed. And the producer, Racer Michaels, is great, and appreciates my work. So yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
And how are you come to be a producer on Vice Squad? Are you kind of involved? How did that kind of extra responsibility come about?
Somebody sent him a scene that I happened to do in, I think it was an acting class. Somebody recorded it and sent it to him, and he liked my work, so he contacted me.
Oh, wonderful! Yeah. I mean, we talked about how sort of the business has perhaps got a bit impersonal, and certainly a lot of actors I speak to in the UK, a lot of auditions are over Zoom, and you don't even see people anymore. Or as you say, you're selling tapes in, so there's not that kind of
Self-tape.
So I suppose you were really lucky that you could get a show like Batman. You couldn't do that these days, could you? You'd have to be. It's a whole different world in terms of how you get into the business, isn't it?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I went to an agent, Bill Belasco. I think it was Bill Belasco. Yeah, Bill Belasco agency. And he sent me to William Dozier. Walked right in. I'm sitting with the vice president of 20th Century Fox. His first question, he says, "Can you act?" I went, "Yeah, I'm great." I mean, I had no idea, but I was cocky, and that kind of, and I had a lot of self-confidence, which was pretty much torn down the first day of Batman. But I got it back. It back.
You say you played a lot of characters that were kind of a bit sort of more sort of like in Batman, sort of villains, or sort of more sort of darker characters. Do you feel you got a bit pigeonholed then in terms of because of your looks and to play certain people?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not your Doris Day type of look, so I never played the happy housewife or the innocent. I mean, I'm dark hair, dark eyes, so I have a typifying statement of I'm a strong look character, so those are the roles that I played.
And I think a lot of actors who play maybe the sort of the whiter than white characters say they would like to play more roles like what you have played. So I think
no, they're fun. I enjoy playing a badass villain.
Yeah.
In Night Mistress, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's always more complexity, I think, to a villain than there is a hero. It's more sort of layered and more to get into as an actor.
Yeah.
Just to finish off, well, lastly, is there any sort of other career highlights that we haven't touched that you would want to mention? Any projects or roles that are particularly treasured by you? A favorite role, maybe?
My favorite role, well, my favorite was Kojak, no question, because that was such a great experience being with Kelly. That was pretty. I think that was pretty. I also like Westworld. Westworld was a great experience. That was a lot of fun. I got to play an Indian. I always wanted to play an Indian. That will never happen today.
No,
You're gonna get Indians like Indians, East Indians to play East Indians, and yeah.
And have you seen the Westworld TV series? Do you?
I have not, and it's interesting because a couple of years ago I owned a raw food vegan restaurant.
Oh.
And there was a Emmy. They do these Emmy gifting suites, and so I had a booth there giving food, of our food, because it was a gourmet restaurant, and the cast of Westworld came in, and I casually mentioned that I was in the original TV show, and they were like in awe of me, saying, "Can we take a picture of you? Can you take a picture? Can we take a picture of you?" And I went, "Yeah." And so that was kind of fun to, but I never saw the TV show. I don't watch a lot of TV except Outlander.
Yeah. Oh, yes, good show. Yeah, I think Westworld's very good, and Ed Harris is particularly good in the Yul Brynner role, and I've seen him on stage, and he's really good with his fans as well.
Who's that?
Ed Harris plays I suppose the Yul Brynner character
Oh,
in Westworld. He's fantastic in it. So just some final thoughts on Batman, because of course I take it was probably just a week or two's work for you back in '66. So you must be very surprised that we're still kind of talking about it, sort of, all
it's
these
never,
years.
it's never left.
Hmm.
It just has never left. I'm just amazed that it's, there are certain things that are on forever, like, Star Trek, there's Star Trekkers, there's Batmanders. It will be forever.
Hmm.
So it's not
Hmm.
something that's new. It's always been there.
Hmm.
And
Uh,
it's interesting because there's a few people that really know every character that played in Batman, and I'll call someplace and, say my name and they go, "Were you on Batman?" And I go, "How would you know that?"
hmm. Yeah, there's lots of dedicated fans for these shows. But when you were on the show, did you get time to visit the iconic sets like the Batcave, and would you sort of have a chance to walk around and see them?
I drove in the Batmobile, so I
Oh,
got to,
yeah.
I didn't go into the Batcave, but I
Yeah.
did drive the Batmobile. I just got in the Batmobile. I actually ripped my knee on something on the Batmobile,
Hmm.
and I really needed stitches. But in my mind, now I'm 18 years old. I
Hmm.
glued the piece of skin back with Johnson's surgical adhesive,
Oh,
and because that was on a Friday, because that Saturday I was meeting with Peyton Price. By Monday, my knee was out to here, and I couldn't get my um, costume on, my pants on, because they were really tight, and my knee was really swollen. Which, again, so they had to doctor me up, and that was my Batmobile experience of ripping my knee somehow.
hmm.
I still have the scar, so it's always reminding me of Batman.
Oh, right. Yeah, a little souvenir. Is there any other people involved with the Batman episodes that we haven't mentioned that you remember? Commissioner Gordon, any of the other characters at all?
No, just just Burgess Meredith.
Hmm. Yeah.
He was, I used to visit him, and he lived in Malibu, so I used to visit here, and
Hmm.
he was just a lovely man.
Yeah. And having seen your episodes occasionally over the years, do you think they hold up quite well? Do you like how they're written? Do you think they're good?
I'm sorry, I
Oh,
didn't hear.
so I was going to say, having seen your episodes through the years,
Having you seen them, or you?
you sort of watched them,
I would not watch it.
so
I don't
you
want to
probably
watch it.
watched it. You probably watched it at the time, but then maybe not since, or
No,
no.
no. I'm like Johnny Depp. He doesn't watch his stuff. I don't watch my stuff, and I'm sure there's a bunch of us.
Oh, yeah, a lot of actors I talk to, because I think like I said to you, Sean, that I can send people copies before we do these events, and some people want to see it, and some people just don't want to have it, because it must be very. I mean, it's very odd watching myself back when I'm editing these videos, and it's sort of, because we all have an idea of what we are like in our head that's not quite
I
as we
remember how
appear.
painful it was for me, and I don't want
Mm,
to look at that
mm,
and see that
mm.
the pain that was there.
Yeah,
It
but
was very
even in your other works, you don't tend to sort of, maybe apart from
no,
Premiere.
the other work I don't mind watching, because I knew my craft at that time. All of it, from Police Story to Banachek to Walk the File, all of them. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. I must say, as a fan of Batman and the Adam West series in particular, I think the two episodes that you're in are fantastic. I think they're well written, they're well directed, and it has a great cast. So I think it's.
I'm sorry. What did you say? I still.
Also, I was just going to say that I think, as a fan of the show, I think your episodes are some of the best of the series.
Yeah, that's
In
what
terms,
I've been told.
yeah, yeah, in terms of writing and directing, and of course the physicality that Julie Newmar brings, and so really good episodes to be involved with. So finally, what's the future hold? Do you have more ambitions to write more books or different kinds of roles? What would you like to achieve going
Just
forward?
started writing my autobiography.
Uh-huh.
Just kind of everybody's, because I've had a pretty interesting life, and
Yeah.
so I just started writing my autobiography. I'm also working on a rewrite for the, with the Pure Cure, because there's a lot more toxins today than when I wrote it, and I just want to help people, feel better and get healthy, and
Yeah.
live a full life like we're meant to live, instead of
Mm.
dealing with all these chemicals. And I mean, how do we live in a toxic world? And it's very
Mm.
toxic.
I,
So I have something that really works.
yeah.
It's all over the
Mm.
world, actually. And it's in 90 days. It's actually called the Ultimate Lifestyle Transformation. And
Mm.
when you're free of toxins and I mean, we'll never be free of toxins and pesticides, because we're getting it every day. And one
Mm.
of the big culprits is glyphosate. And so I've got the #1 product in the world that gets rid of glyphosate, third-party studies. And that's just part of the protocol that I work with. And
Mm.
I love doing it. I love helping people feel better.
Oh yeah,
That.
yeah, yeah. And
So,
there was a lot of the news recently about microplastics and how there's more
we,
plastic in the ocean than there is stars in the sky, they were saying. So,
we consume a credit card worth of plastic a week. And the company's products that I work with is 99% plastic free. The packaging is made out of hemp, bamboo, and tree sap. And by the end of the year, we'll be 100%.
oh
And
wow. Yeah,
they've saved over 250,000 pounds of plastic in the environment. So it's a
fantastic.
very pure company.
Oh, that
And
sounds fantastic. Wonderful, wonderful work. Do you have a title for your autobiography yet? Or are you still kind of thinking of one?
I do have a title for it.
Yeah. You're keeping it secret, I take it for the moment.
Uh,
Well, mm,
yeah,
yeah.
I do have a title for it. It's a great title.
Because I think it will be quite interesting because obviously I did quite a bit of research for tonight, and a few projects that you were mentioning just on your IMDb page, or so there's a few things that people might not know you were in, and so I think people will like your autobiography when it comes out.
Yeah, if anybody, I can give people my email if they want to get in touch with me, or it's livinghealth24 at AOL.com. I'm sorry, I still use AOL.
Oh,
Um,
nothing wrong very
it's
well.
Living Health, LIVINGHEALTH 24 at
Mhm.
AOL.com.
Fantastic. And is there any other type of character that you would like to play in the future that you haven't done so?
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot.
Mm.
I'd like to play a jazz singer, because I sing jazz. I'm
All
also,
right.
I
Yeah.
mentioned that I'm also a jazz singer. They can go, if they Google SharynWynters.com,
Mhm.
they can hear my music.
So how did you get into to music?
Oh, that's another God thing. You know, when I was very young, I bought the story that I couldn't sing and never sang a note. And when I came out here, I became an actress, so I never pursued it. And again, one morning, I guess it was after 9/11,
Mm.
God came to me and said, "What did you want to do that you hadn't realized?" And it was sing. And I used to hang out at jazz clubs when I was 16 years old, when I was introduced by a boyfriend of jazz. I mean, Thelonious Monk and John Coltrane and Mose Allison and all these great, and Lambert Hendricks and Ross. And so I knew music, but I didn't think I could sing. And I
Mm.
called up an old friend of mine, Deanie Clark, who was Billie Holiday's piano player at 17, and taught Peabo Bryson and Roberta Flack. And I said, "Do you think you could teach me how to sing?" And he said, "I can teach a dog how to sing." So I started to study with him. And again, 6 months later, I got a CD out. I mean, it's just
Mm.
been incredible. And because I know that music, I know those, I used to get dressed every Friday with Frank on WHAT FM from 6 to 8 o'clock. They play, I know every Frank Sinatra song. I think there is, and I knew all the lyrics, and you know, so I know that music. And I love singing jazz standards.
Yeah, I think there's some very wonderful. I mean, talking about Frank Sinatra, I did see Tony Bennett at the Albert Hall, the Royal Albert Hall, 4 or 5 years ago, and that was something to see a legend like him on stage. And so yes, I'm a big music fan myself. Well, thank you very much for such a wonderful conversation. It's been really wonderful talking to you today. And yeah,
Thank you, Philip.
yeah. So
there's my dogs. It's
well, I'll let you get to your dogs, and thank you very much. And
I'm glad my parrot's been quiet. I mean, I've got a little menagerie here. I got 3 dogs, a cat, and a bird, and a parrot.
And then they all get on, I take it, and
sometimes they don't get along, but you know, it's like any family.
Yeah. Well, it sounds lovely. So well, thank you very much, and we look forward to all your projects and your autobiography, and yeah, keep doing what you're doing. Sounds wonderful.
Thank you. You have a great day.
You too.
Great evening. It's 11:30 at night there, right?
Almost 8 o'clock, almost 8 p.m. So we'll I think 7 hours. So, what time are we now? Is it about lunchtime for you, sort of thing? Yeah. So not too bad. Well, yeah, have a great weekend, and take care.
Thank you. God bless.
You too. Thank you.
Namaste.
Bye-bye.
Bye.